The long-awaited meetup is finally happening on today's show. We're going to be interviewing the original BSD podcaster, Will Backman, to discuss what he's been up to and what the future of BSD advocacy is going to look like. After that, we're going to be showing you how to track and even cross-compile the current branch of NetBSD. We've got answers to your user-submitted questions, and of course, all the latest news, as usual, here on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. Now, episode 27, BSD Now versus BSDTalk, recorded March 5th, 2014. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
Hey, we're glad to have you guys with us today. We got a fun show with you on this week before Asia BSD Con. So again, if you are planning on going, get that all lined up. You only got about a week now. But
Not
we will
even.
go into
By the time this comes out, it'll be Monday.
Yeah, that's right. You only have a few days.
Yes.
Hurry. So
Yep.
I imagine most people who are going have gotten their tickets by now.
I would hope
But if you haven't, and if you're in the Tokyo area and you'd like to show up, come on down.
Yeah.
You can meet Alan and me there.
Yeah.
But
we'll
talk. Go ahead.
If you're from there on Wednesday next week, there's a little Beehive meetup. Go to beehivecon.org and get the details.
Oh, yes. Yep. Cool. Okay. Well, we'll hopefully see some of you guys there next week. But first up, let's get to our weekly headlines. So I guess we have some news about FreeBSD and OpenBSD being in the Google Summer of Code 2014.
Yeah.
So what's going on with that, Alan? Is it pretty much same as previous years? They have a list
mostly.
of projects?
Yeah. So for those that don't know, the Google Summer of Code is a program Google runs where they offer university students money to work on an open source project over the summer instead of having a summer job.
Sure.
And so it's a 12-week program where you have a mentor from an open source project. So you're not just writing stuff by yourself. You have a mentor and you're actually learning how to do it properly and everything. The projects like FreeBSD and OpenBSD have a list of things they'd like people to work on, but also students can propose their own projects as long as it meets the criteria, 12 weeks worth of work and so on. And a lot of cool things have come out of that before.
There's been a lot of projects where that's where they got their start. They were a Google Summer of Code thing, either got committed right away or developed even a little further after the project was initially over.
Yep.
And we're using some of that tech now. So it's a great program. I mean, also for students, if you're looking for a job in this industry, I mean, getting to know a mentor in the project, getting to know how the project works, and then using this as kind of getting your foot in the door is just a great way to do it. Yeah. But both FreeBSD and OpenBSD were accepted this year. So if any of you guys are listening, please check out their Google Summer of Code pages if you're a student and would like to do it. Now, it is restricted just to students, right, Alan?
Yes, there's Google has a bunch of restrictions for that.
Sure.
I don't know. But yes, they have, if you can't think of something to work on, there's an ideas page on the FreeBSD wiki. Also, OpenBSD has a list here, some interesting ones like porting Capsicum over to OpenBSD, because that's a great security technology in FreeBSD.
Sure.
Implementing a centralized DH client daemon, making a DHCP6 client, doing OpenBSD style privilege separation in the DHCP server, replacing DHCPD and DH client parsing code with a YAC parser. They want to implement GPT in OpenBSD. Porting Valgrind to OpenBSD, porting Clang sanitizer to OpenBSD, do fib routing integration in OpenBGPD, which is interesting, or porting the Nouveau drivers over to OpenBSD and lots of things like that.
Wow. So there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I've got the FreeBSD list up here, and they got 70 odd items here as potential projects. So there's a lot of good ideas out there. Everything from putting FreeBSD on a smartphone, that could be an interesting project, to interactive splash screens, porting the FreeBSD loader over to Lua. Oh gosh, I'm just trying to see some Beehive stuff.
Yeah, building the Intel E1000 Ethernet driver model in user space for Beehive, or a Beehive in-kernel timer emulation, or USB device model in user space for Beehive.
Yeah, lots of good Beehive stuff. And I'm going to look at all the desktop stuff. So let's see, VirtualBox shared folder support for FreeBSD guests. That's kind of cool. KDE front ends to the FreeBSD update utility. Interesting. Improving wine support on FreeBSD, webcam, so additional webcam support.
Yeah, and like Dylan just pointed out in the chat room, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't require being a kernel hacker. The one thing they want to build is a website community portal system in like node.js, which might be a lot easier to approach for some people than, writing Ethernet drivers in the kernel.
Writing new device driver, which interacts with the kernel. Yeah, no. Well, that's cool. There's definitely a great list of ideas here, plus a bunch that have already come in via the web, NTPD replacements, FreeBSD pre-seed installation using Pixie, unified ping 6. I mean, there's just a lot of cool ideas out there. And again, if you're a student, that's a good place to get started. Yeah, they have
somebody wants to port TrueCrypt as a GOM gate userland driver implementation so that you could have TrueCrypt but have it exposed as a device. That looks really interesting too.
Cool. So, of course, you can hit up the links for that after the show. But we will move on from that to our next article for the week. So, of course, yes, you too can be an evil network overlord. Oh, that's an interesting title.
Yes.
So we have a new blog post about monitoring your network using only free tools. And the link will be in the show notes, of course. But they talk about OpenBSD being a great fit for that. It has all the stuff you pretty much need in the base system or via packages. And it's going to go through a lot about the pflow pseudo interface, its capabilities, relation to NetFlow. Also goes well with using PF.
Yep.
And there's going to be additional details about FlowD, NFSEN, more great tools, which make network monitoring pretty stinking easy.
Yep.
And of course,
he says in the article here, one question I get a lot, or a variant at the is, how do you keep up with what's happening on your network? And how do you know exactly what your users are doing? And he says the exact answer to both can have legal implications, right? You can't just, depending on the legal framework and where you are and a bunch of things, you can't just go spying on everything everybody does, but it's technically possible to do. And here's how you would do it.
Should you need it? Yeah. Well, that's definitely a cool article. So if you're listening, Peter, you need to pretty much stop ignoring our emails and come on the show. We know you're out there.
I got him to agree to it in a message one time, but we just never scheduled it. And
well, he's at some of the conferences, I believe,
yes,
right?
Well, because he's the guy that came up to me in the bar at BSD last year and twisted my arm into giving a talk in Malta.
Yeah, we're going to find him.
Not that I needed my arm twisted, but he was like...
It was a very light twisting.
Well,
take much.
He actually had a topic in mind already. Like, he's not just like, will you come give a talk? He's like, will you come give a talk about this? I'm like, I suppose I could do that, sure. He's like, I was going to do something else, but I was going to do Varnish, and then PHK was coming, so that didn't make any sense anyway.
Sure. Well, we'll find him at a conference, and we will get an impromptu interview if that's the way we got to do it.
We will.
But speaking of Peter, that's actually a great segue into our next article about BSD Magazine. Their February issue is out, which has an interview with Peter Hanstein. Hey.
Oh, wasn't he's giving all his interview to other people? Yeah,
I see how it is. But anyway, the theme for this magazine is configuring basic services on OpenBSD 5.4, hence the interview with Peter. I'm sure that's great transition there, but also a lot of cool topics such as locking down SSH. We got a GIMP lesson for those who want to get a little more skilled with GIMP, user group management, and for some reason Linux and Solaris articles in this issue. Not quite sure if that's a new trend or a new format or what's going on there. Have you heard anything else?
It's just with Puppet, I suppose. I guess because it has Solaris, they covered it, but it might just be that, if you're admitting a bunch of BSD, you might have a couple of other mixed environment, right?
Sure. So trying to be a little platform agnostic for somebody in the workplace. I gotcha. Cool. So again, check that out. So BSD Magazine's a free one. You can grab the digital version right off their website and bsdmag.org. The links will be in the show notes if you'd like to grab that issue and read the interview with Peter or some cool stuff about OpenBSD 5.4.
Yeah.
Cool. And some more OpenBSD news, changes in bcrypt.
Yes.
So what's this about?
Right. So bcrypt is the password hashing algorithm. It's used by a bunch of people, especially because at this point so far anyway, it's more resistant to cracking by GPUs than most of the other algorithms like SHA 512 crypt. So when it was originally created, it was $2, right? Because $1 was MD5.
Sure.
But there was a mistake or something, and it ended up being $2A because they had to make some changes to it, and the hashes wouldn't have been compatible. Anyway, they're going to have to change that to $2B now because of another error that was found. If you remember a while back, there was the Solar Designer guys that build one implementation of bcrypt, not the OpenBSD one, but a different one. There was a bug with theirs found that if you had any really strange characters, anyone's with the top bit set, so anything that wasn't 7-bit safe in your password, it would cause your hash to be really strange and not work properly or something. Well, they found another problem in their implementation that does actually apply to the OpenBSD implementation of bcrypt, and that is if your password is longer than 255 characters, then there's an overflow and it doesn't hash properly.
Well, I imagine not too many people are running into that, but
yeah, exactly. But in the name of correctness, they're doing a new implementation, and so the way that'll work is in OpenBSD 5.5, it will support the $2B hashes, but any new password you make will still be $2A or $2A. So they'll keep using the old one, but they'll support the new one. And then in 5.6, they'll switch the default to making the new one. That way, all the older systems will support it by then, because OpenBSD only maintains backwards compatibility with the one version prior to the current one.
Oh, that makes sense. So, I guess it says here FreeBSD's already updated this.
Yeah, so we've already imported it into head, but again, we're not changing the default either for now. And it's not that big of a deal because I don't know that there's very many people that have 256 character passwords.
Well, it's one of those things. I mean, how long did it take for somebody to run into that?
Well, it's somebody just while reading the code or whatever realized that was a problem, that I don't know that anybody actually had a password that long. It was probably caught by like a test or by a manual audit of the code rather than it was.
Yeah, no actual user bug report came in saying, yeah, my password's 300 characters long
and it doesn't work.
It's not working. But no, that's cool though. So I guess that'll be fixed here shortly. So I guess they need to port that over to Net and then Dragonfly, etc.
NetBSD does support bcrypt. So yes, I guess Dragonfly would have. It's been in FreeBSD since 4, so Dragonfly will have it too.
Sure. Okay. Well, cool. Well, there's a lot of specifics about this in the email, so you can of course check the full post after the show and kind of get into the gory details on what this is all about. So that's the wrap up for the weekly news headlines. So what about our sponsor this week, Alan?
Yes.
Who might that be?
IX Systems.
Okay.
And they have some news. They've launched the new FreeNAS Mini. Which if you look over here at storagereview.com, let me show the picture. It is even prettier than the old one.
That's nice. And I see they got their nicely designed logo there. They had that contest a couple months back to pick that. Yeah. That must be the winner.
And
let's see
the little
mini
locking case on the front, and you can see the little hard drive lights through it. And
it's a 4-bay Mini, which has an 8-core, 2.4 gigahertz Intel CPU, dual gigabit network links.
There you go.
Designed pretty much from the ground up based on feedback from you and the FreeNAS community.
Yep.
So, of course, aside from the CPU, what do they got? 16 gigs of RAM.
Although it's upgradable to 32.
Yeah, dang, man.
Well, but I know that dual gigabit Ethernet was definitely something people wanted.
That is really stinking cool. So the most significant upgrade also is the addition of ECC RAM.
Oh,
interesting.
Okay. So
if you go down below the picture.
So it must be an E3 processor rather than like an i3 or i5.
Yeah, let me see. I'm looking for details here. They said it's a power efficient 8-core, drawing only 17 watts.
Yeah, they used the low power version because normally the Intel processor that size is 30 something watts, but they have the low power ones that are 17. A little bit more money, but you make it back in saving power.
Dang. Well, that's great. And 16 gigs of memory and on a ZFS box with 4 bays like that.
Yeah, with ECC and with a chip that supports the ASNI offload, means that you get ridiculous speeds in your even encrypted disks. And it's The reason they went with the higher end processor and motherboard is it's actually capable of completely saturating both gigabit ports at once.
Dang, that is nice.
That is very
nice. So the total power consumption on this sucker is between 37 and 47 watts.
Wow.
I mean, that's less than your old incandescent light bulb. I mean, come on.
Well, yeah, like even the i5 and the old FreeNAS Mini would have taken that much just for the processor.
Sure, that is cool.
And it has IPMI, so they used a server motherboard on it, so it has the remote management interface. So across your LAN, you can turn it on and off and get console access to it and stuff.
Yeah, so it literally can be back in the closet where there's no monitor.
Exactly.
You don't have to drag anything over to it ever again.
Yeah, because you can even mount an ISO image from your computer to the FreeNAS in another room to do, say, the upgrade when, something like FreeNAS 9.2.1.2 comes out.
Dang. Well, so I'm looking at this. So the pricing and availability, I guess the bare bones model, entry level, $995 for this. That's with no hard drives.
Yeah, but that's only slightly higher than the old one that was based on i3, and you're getting a server processor, server motherboard, IPMI, ECC RAM. Wow. Yeah,
that's stinking cool. And of course, they can go up from there. You can do 4 1 terabyte drives for $12.95, $14.95 for 4 2 terabyte drives, and then 4 3 terabyte drives and 4 4 terabyte drives are available as well.
That's all kinds of fancy.
Yeah, that is just a really nice little box. So hats off to the guys at IX.
And also the package. So the package includes your FreeNAS Mini, a power cord, because that's not something you always expect to get, the quick start guide, pair of keys for the thing, the hot swap base, and goodies.
Yep.
Yes, or get a bunch of stickers or something, I suppose.
There's got to be stickers and swag in there, but still, that's just thinking cool.
Everybody needs one of these.
Okay, well, cool.
That's cool.
Well, that is awesome. Again, hats off to the IX guys. That's a pretty neat unit they did there.
It is.
Of course, all based on Intel processors.
Yes.
That's what they do, and it is quite cool.
And that's the only way they can get the power envelope that small. Yeah, and
very cool.
The really nice server processor with ECC RAM. That's a big improvement. And they also have some more pictures here from day 2 of the Scale conference they were at recently. Yep. You can see them touring around and talking to people.
Well, also, we will mention there's a new release, to go along with that. We have a new FreeNAS release, 9.2.1.2 release is now out.
They basically seem to be having one almost every week.
Yeah, just about every week or two. There's another release out they're pretty much bug fixes.
Yes, they're pounding out the bug fixes really fast.
That is a good deal. So yeah, of course, you can hit up the links in the show notes afterwards. Take a look at that. Check out that new release. Upgrade your existing FreeNAS box, or if you've been waiting for the moment to jump on board and get one, we'll have the links where you can pick those up.
Yeah, so definitely, you can pick that up by going to ixsystems.com/BSD Now. And tell them we sent you.
Yep, tell them we sent you, and they'll hook you up with whatever you need, no matter how small or big. And if you want a honking massive one, they'll build one for you as well.
Yes, so whether it's a tiny FreeNAS Mini to go under your desk or, a rack full of servers. They actually have a service where they'll fill a whole rack and, they'll send the tech out and install it for you.
Sure.
They do, whether you want the tiniest thing they sell or, a truckload of stuff, they will make it happen.
Excellent. So again, that address is ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Check it out. Tell them we sent you, and of course, grab their free guide to open source servers. Buying servers for open source, you can get at that URL, which will give you all kinds of details on how to work with a vendor when you're getting ready to purchase a server.
Yep. It'll make you realize why you should use them.
Definitely.
Especially if you've ever dealt with some other vendor, you'd be like, yeah, I can see why I should be using IX.
Well, the burn-in, the fact that they truly understand open source.
The fact that they're not going to be like, oh, yeah, it works with BSD. It's like, no, they're going to make sure it works with BSD before they even start selling it.
And they have the people on staff to make sure it works.
Yes,
and then fix it if there's something that doesn't work. And, it's just very cool.
It's like, so who am I talking to? Oh, you're the guy that wrote that. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
you wrote the driver.
You're an expert.
Cool. Well, excellent. Again, check out that URL, and we'll be back in just a moment with our interview for the week with the awesome Will Backman. Okay, today we're joined by Will Backman. Hey, Will, glad to have you with us.
Yeah, good to see you folks again. It's normally in person at a conference, but this is great.
This is really cool. So, as usual, give us a little bit about your history with BSD, how you got involved with it. Of course, I'm sure you'll mention BSD Talk, but yeah, give us a little bit of background, how you first got your feet wet.
Yeah, sure. For a large part of my life, a lot of my Unix-like history was with Linux. And a long, long, long time ago, I guess when it started to get serious was when I had a friend who started an internet service provider. So this was in the 90s, back when internet service providers were dial-up. Mm-hmm. And around the same time, I had been playing with this thing called Minix on probably a 46. I don't even remember, but just sort of playing around with it. And I had a friend also who had a book, I think it was the O'Reilly Red Hat Companion. And this was back when the kernel didn't support dynamically loaded drivers or modules. And so there was a big folder with a listing of all the different types of hardware that a particular kernel would support. And so there were kernels compiled for like 3Com networking cards or this kind of video card, and you had to pick the right one when you did your install. Either way, playing with the Unix world back then was mostly a hobby. And at the ISP that my friend ran, I helped, with a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But he was building his dial-in pool by getting some serial port cards and connecting a bunch of like US Robotics 33.6 or 56K modems. And eventually moved up to something called Livingston Portmasters with a PRI, digital line, as opposed to buying really expensive analog lines. I mean, the place was just a cabling mess. And along with that, started using Radius services. And there was a Radius server that was provided by Livingston. And it was on Windows NT. It was prior to Service Pack 6. And so this was when Windows NT was just not stable. And he was getting to the point where it was locking up. And as soon as the device that was doing his Radius stopped working, none of his dial-up modem pools would work.
Sure.
Was on the phone with Livingston a lot. And they eventually said, there's this thing called Linux that we also have a Radius server that you could use. And we suggest trying Linux instead, or Unix. I mean, they supported a variety of things. And so my friend said, hey, a little bit about Unix. Why don't you help me set up this Linux box? And so we took a piece of garbage. I think the case didn't even fit. It was bent. I don't know. The thing had been dropped. And threw a Linux distribution on it. And from that, I started being the one that took care of a lot of the Linux machines. It was also lovely, having a friend with an ISP with a couple T1s coming into his basement. It meant that forever ago, I got free co-location hosting. Basically, I was allowed to put a box on a T1 with a real IP address out to the world. And so that's sort of really where I learned a lot about the internet services side of it. This was also back before the US loosened up a little bit of their crypto laws. And so none of the Linux distributions could ship secure shell. And Telnet was the default thing. And you had to go and get an RPM from some Canadian repository or French repository in order to download secure shell. And this was starting to pique our interest about security and everything. And so I saw that this secure shell thing that we were downloading was from a distribution called OpenBSD.
Sure.
And so then I thought, well, gee, there's a distribution that seems to ship with something useful. And I remember sending an email to the mailing list for OpenBSD, sort of asking about it. And the people that wrote back were really helpful and friendly. And so I thought, gee, I'd start playing with this distribution also. So didn't end up actually putting the BSDs in that ISP, but it caused me to start researching the BSDs and downloading a FreeBSD ISO and all the other ones. And I mean, I would install anything at the time. I mean, when BIOS came out with their free disk that you could download, I'd install that. If I could get a hold of OS2, I was just an operating system nut. Came into possession of some Silicon Graphics workstations, really old ones, and so that was sort of, I guess, how I got interested in it. It was really through, I would say, OpenSSH that brought the BSDs to my awareness.
Cool. So yes, in case some of our viewers don't already know, you host a podcast called BSD Talk. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how it started?
Yeah. I started, I don't even know when it was, a long time ago, a job at a community development financial institution that was about an hour away from where I lived, although I also I was the network guy, really the just about everything person for 9 offices across the state of Maine. And I was putting 30 to 40,000 miles a year on my car, driving around to, bring a replacement keyboard or fire up a new server or do something else. So I was spending a lot of time in the car. You listen to the news, you start feeling like you're up on current events, but you start to get depressed about the war and the famine everywhere in the world. And so I started listening to podcasts, and podcasts really saved my life. So I started, as I was listening to all these podcasts, I realized this operating system that I really like to use in my personal life, I couldn't find anything on these operating systems. And I think in the spirit of the open source world, if you have an itch, scratch it. So it was my way of contributing back. So I was really fortunate that when I contacted people, they were willing to talk to me and be interviewed.
Cool. So it's been around a lot longer than we've been doing BSD now. So what year was it that it started again?
I think it was, I call it 2005, but really I think it was December 2005. So I just squeaked it in.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was around 2005. And originally I started with tutorials. I didn't have anyone to talk to. So I started doing some basic tutorials on the BSDs and then started contacting people. If anything, I can really appreciate what you're trying to do with your podcast. It's a tremendous amount of effort. It's not just the time spent during the podcast, but developing tutorials takes a tremendous amount. And I was trying to do all my tutorials as being sort of BSD agnostic. So I built a laptop that was triple boot, net, open, and FreeBSD. So if I did a tutorial on how to mount a USB thumb drive, I tried to do it such that what I was doing worked on all 3, and that takes a tremendous amount of time. Also, I find that a lot of people are reluctant to toot their own horn or to, they aren't necessarily seeking the limelight. And you can contact people and they might be open to doing some interviews, but it takes a lot of follow-up and a lot of cajoling to get people to really be interviewed.
Yeah, you just got to get them talking. And once they do, there's all kinds of great information they give you where you don't even have to ask them many questions, but you just have to convince them to try, first of all. But we have a long way to go to catch up to you with 238 episodes you have.
Although you're weekly. I was doing about weekly during a time in my life, but then I took a new job, and this new job is just crushing my time. And I've committed to doing 1 a month, so I've slowed way down. And it's not because there's not a lot to talk about.
It'll still be a long time catching you. The other podcasts I've been doing for 3 years now, we're up to episode 151 or something like that. And you're at 238.
Yeah, it was funny. I was recently I decided that I'd better host my files in more than one place because I also teach in the evenings at the University of Maine, and I host the files there because they have really fat pipes and bandwidth isn't particularly a problem. And that's why I don't do any sort of advertising or anything commercial. That way I can host it there. But every once in a while, the server that's hosting those files might glitch out on us, and I thought, okay, I'd never actually licensed my podcasts under anything. Which at least under U.S. copyright law means that I retain the copyright. But finally I said, I might as well put Creative Commons and whatever that license is that basically says, do what you want with it. I don't care just as long as you attribute it to me. And I thought, okay, I'll upload the episodes also to archive.org, which caused me to go and actually upload them all. And I realized that there was a year or two there where I did more than 50 in a year.
Wow.
Dang.
Which there's only 52 weeks in a year. So
it's hard enough to find 2 hours to sit down and record it, let alone this show wouldn't really be possible without TJ doing a lot of the organizing and the notes and setting up the interviews and writing the tutorials for us, because even just getting the 2 hours a week to do the show is a challenge sometimes.
It can be, for sure, especially when we all have other jobs too, so it's keeps us busy.
And travel, lots of conferences to go to and stuff.
Yes. It's going to these conferences is always a great way to get stuff and meet people.
They're just so great. I wish I started going like 6 years ago.
And I'm glad, as I've been slowing down, I was so happy to see BSD Now coming along because, I don't consider myself to be journalism. Right. I consider it to be advocacy. I'm not there to try and sort of be, play hardball with the people I'm interviewing, but rather to produce another avenue for people to learn about not just
Sure.
the BSD operating systems. My podcast is generally anything licensed under a permissive license. So even though it's called BSD Talk,
Right.
if something is licensed under the MIT license or really anything else that's permissive, I want to get the word out that there are all kinds of organizations and companies out there that aren't afraid of this permissive license. It's actually been around for a really long time.
Cool. So in addition, what other kind of topics do you usually talk about on the show?
Yeah, tutorials I've just stopped doing. I really had wanted to do a little bit more of that. I guess to a certain extent, when I started this, the technology wasn't there for doing video as easily as we can now.
Also, virtualization wasn't there to be able to pull up three machines side by side as easily either.
Yeah. And so to do a lot of tutorials also as audio only would mean that I would have to read everything I'm typing on the screen. And that wouldn't necessarily have worked so well. And so you really need to do video for a lot of that. So I didn't want to do video. So some of my tutorials I did at the beginning just because I was looking for content, but I haven't been doing that much anymore. But at this point, it's operating systems. For a while there also, at a lot of the BSD conferences, they weren't recording the audio at the conferences or live streaming like they are now. So one of the things I also was doing was going to all these conferences and putting microphones on the stands and then providing the recordings to the conference organizers. And occasionally, it required a talk that works well audio only.
Yeah.
If people are displaying slides that are really funny and you're listening to a talk and hearing people laugh at something, but you can't see what it is, that could be a little frustrating. So not all audio only talks are ones that I publish. So yeah, it's tutorials, any talks that I record at conferences, and then the other one is just trying to highlight the great work that a lot of these people are doing, some for money and some not. And I even, to a certain extent, when I go back through the list of all the people I've interviewed, sometimes I'm a bit surprised. Eric Raymond and, other people who are, in the Linux world. Because to a certain extent, I feel that we're all part of this family of people that like the Unix design philosophy, but we didn't necessarily want to pay Sun Microsystems for their expensive hardware. And so these open source Unix-like operating systems give us some of that amazing design without having to pay a lot. I love commercial Unix hardware. The stuff is amazing. It's beautiful. It's nothing like you'd see on a PC, but really it's anyone that likes the Unix design philosophy.
So here's kind of an interesting, slightly podcast-specific question, but has there ever been an interview that has gone horribly, horribly wrong?
Yeah, and I've had some interviews where, I wouldn't say that any of them have gone horribly wrong. Obviously, there's been ones where the audio, something happened to the audio, and I've used a variety of technologies over the years. And I had one where it was using, I think, an asterisk box, and the incoming and outgoing audio over short conversations worked well. But if you went to about an hour, the audio was being multiplexed in final recording, but suddenly you realized people were talking over each other because somehow the recording was delayed slightly. And that just meant chopping up the interview pretty heavily in order to try and salvage it. The other things I've had is occasionally people that have decided, because I give people the option of hearing the edited interview before it's published. And I've had some people just say either they didn't feel comfortable with how it went, or other times I've had somebody where they've passed it through their company's PR firm, and the company PR firm said, actually, you met this engineer at a conference, but we'd prefer that it actually go through a PR person, and so that that happens. The only other, I guess, weird one that might have gone in a direction that I didn't want it to was an interview that I did with Richard Stallman from the GNU Foundation, and I was trying to do it in the spirit of open source operating systems all have sort of common challenges around patents and other kinds of things. And in a lot of the public statements that he has, the BSD license isn't considered evil by him. So I thought it would be nice to reach out and just sort of try and talk about the common threads that our communities have. But he basically said he would only agree to do the interview if it was published in a free format, basically not as an MP3.
Org or whatever.
And Yep. So he wanted an OGG, and I do an OGG stream. So basically, the MP3 is a very short MP3 that says, "Hi, I know you want to listen to this, but you need to use OGG." Now, that's not necessarily what went wrong. What did go wrong is that he stated that he felt that the port system was bad because the port system made it very easy to download and install non-free software, and he felt that that was just as bad as providing the non-free software yourself. And unfortunately, that bled into a bit of a flame war where people said, well, the GCC compiler is ported to Win32 by your foundation. And so instead of sort of bridging the communities, it created a bit of a fight between the communities. And so that's, you do your best, but
it kind of. I think someone said it at NYC BSD Con. It's like the BSD and Linux community, or even just the different parts of the BSD community, are kind of like the Army and the Air Force. They don't really get along, but if it comes down to it, it's them versus somebody else. Then they'll get along. Under certain conditions, then yes, they're the armed forces or whatever, and they all get along, and they're against somebody else. But if you leave them to their own devices, they won't get along very well at all. Yeah.
And I hate to scare up a fake common enemy, as a way to try and galvanize people around a cause, but I don't know what else it would take. To a certain extent, with open source software, one of the ways you relieve pressure within a project is forking, and that's going to happen. There's not much you can do about it. So.
Yep. So what's the biggest interview you've ever done, or your favorite one?
Every single one I've done with Chris Moore and Alan Jude.
Okay, seriously now, though.
Yeah, and I go back through them all the time, and I don't really know. Obviously there's been some big names on there, from the Linux community or from the BSD community, but it's hard to say sort of what has served my cause best. It's been nice to talk to people from large commercial companies like Google and Yahoo, or now FlightAware, which everyone is kind of aware of, to get the word out that there are some companies with all the money in the world. And the reason they're choosing BSD is not because it's free, but because they feel that technically it meets their needs, or it matches the skills of the people they have on hand. And but even the hobbyist interviews that I do, just end users, I think are great. When I talk to developers, while the developers I think are always curious to hear podcasts where other developers talk, very technical topics, I've also found some of the developers have said, oh, we love hearing from end users who during the interview are just appreciative of the work we're doing. And it's nice to hear that it's actually being used by people and it's working well for them.
For me, I think most of my favorite interviews are the ones we did in person versus over the Skype and stuff. Sure. But, our worst one obviously would have been the Matt Aarons interview where the cable fell out of the microphone and we didn't get any audio.
Yeah.
and that was also the interview I was most excited about. And so we're going to hog tie him in Asia and record a quadruple interview or something.
We'll do that again. Yeah, we will have 3 microphones.
Yes, and we'll just make him do 4 interviews back to back. We'll just have Matt Aarons in a can. Yeah, but it's hard to say which was my favorite, but honestly, getting to sit down with Kirk and Jordan and Theo and Henning and stuff, it was just or PHK even, and it was I can't pick a favorite one. They're all great.
Yeah. And, if any of them are listening, and it's just, I'm so appreciative of the time that they give, some of these people are not comfortable speaking, and some of them aren't native English speakers, and they're still willing to come on and struggle with these technical topics. And it takes a real leap of faith.
I think the person that we had that was the most nervous probably was Igor Soziev, the guy from Nginx. Still haven't got around to using that interview because I want to write a really awesome tutorial to go with it. And or also Glenn, who was afraid to show his face. But yeah, so up until we started this, BSD Talk was the only really dedicated BSD podcast. I think there have been 2 or 3 other ones that have started and did like 1 or 2 episodes and then disappeared again. Do you think BSD, what do you see as the future of BSD advocacy?
Yeah, I guess it's a multiple front war. So there are advocacy groups and mailing lists. People are more connected now. And so to a certain extent, social media is a way of promoting it. So we're one small area, the audio and video podcast. For the advocacy side of things, I guess, how do we measure? You can't, I guess it's hard to measure success if you don't know what your measures are at this point.
We don't have a little form when you go to download the ISO and be, where did you find out about BSD from?
Yeah,
sure.
Or like when you do fundraisers, you got that thermometer meter. But when it comes to advocacy, I think also like with the BSDs, due to the license, it can be pretty easy for companies to be using it and developing it without necessarily knowing about it right away. But I think also people are surprised by how much it is used. The trouble I've had, and I think we see this in a whole bunch of market segments, whether it be desktop operating systems or even cell phones or TVs or anything else, is it seems that markets as they mature seem to settle around 2 to 3 vendors. And so when I just even look at my professional experience, when I started at the job that I'm in right now, one of the difficulties we had was that we had way too many operating systems in the desktop and the server room, and some of them were just variants. So for example, in the server room, we had a mixture of distributions of Linux, both Debian-based, Ubuntu, and Red Hat, and then we also had Mac servers, and we had Windows servers. And so a lot of organizations are saying, to have a person or a group of people that have deep knowledge in a particular operating system is pretty expensive. So if you've got 6 platforms that you're supporting, you end up needing to buy 6 very expensive engineers. And so they're trying to reduce the number of operating systems that they have. And with the BSDs, quite often you'll see in a lot of shops that there is already some Windows infrastructure. And when there's a Unix infrastructure, quite often there's perhaps a Linux infrastructure. And I know for me, I've occasionally put BSDs into production, but often where I'm the one that's working on them. But to add BSD almost means for a lot of shops having to replace something else with it, which means a wholesale rip and replacement. And I think that's sort of that's a struggle for a lot of organizations. I think the BSD certification group probably is doing a great job of trying to allay some of those fears, where you can find people that are qualified in the BSDs, not just because they said they've played with it at home.
And I guess also appliances, like, even most Linux shops, they'll have a FreeNAS over there in the corner somewhere, and they don't even really think that that's not Linux. It's a FreeNAS. And I think seeing more and more appliances like that, where it's like, oh, well, we come to realize that half of our shop is already BSD because we got the PFSense, the pair of PFSense over here and the pair of FreeNAS over here. And, maybe that can let us get our foot in the door kind of thing.
Yeah, we're sort of that way. We've got a net app that we were just remarking is up for about 700 and something days today. And it's just a thing that keeps chugging, and it's got a lot of BSD in it. We've got some PFSense VPN endpoints connecting some of our schools, and they just chug along. And but sort of our plumbing, which is the DNS, DHCP kind of stuff. There's really no reason that plumbing couldn't be replaced with BSD at this point, because we're managing a lot of it using Webmin, which is a BSD licensed, which was actually one of my first interviews that involved another person was Webmin. Tell you what, scheduling interviews with somebody in Australia or Japan is a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had to do that for OpenSSH guy.
Yeah. So, to a certain extent, once you slap a management interface on it, like Webmin, not that I necessarily advocate that as the best way of managing stuff, but it's what was in place, you can sort of rip and replace underneath. But I know for me, I've just been trying to avoid too many variants.
Well, that's kind of one of the nice things about the management, like the orchestration systems, like Puppet, Chef, Salt, Ansible, etc., is that they can abstract the differences away, where you just say, set this up like this, and it takes care of knowing what the different way to do that, if how to make a service start at boot is different on FreeBSD than this kind of Linux than that kind of Linux. And when it takes that part away, it makes it a little easier, maybe.
That's a good... Oh, go ahead.
For me, another goal of advocacy isn't even around the operating systems, but around the license. Because I feel that, at least for the BSD community, the GPL license is something you can use, but it's a bit of a one-way gate. And so if there's some great technologies that are people developing in the open source world, if they're licensed under something more permissive, it makes it a bit easier for it to be adopted by all operating systems. Meanwhile, and I don't want to get into the whole licensing war. I think people should be able to choose the license they want. But we also have the right to advocate for the license we prefer. And, I think licensing for the BSD or other permissive licenses makes it very useful to the BSDs. And at the New York City BSD conference, there was something during one of the talks that I thought was a great way of putting it. And Michael Lucas was giving a talk about the BSDs, and what he said was the BSDs create the lowest common denominator. I don't know if that was the exact words he said, but he basically said that if you can't write a networking stack that's better than the BSD networking stack, then please just take ours. Why should we have to survive somebody's worst software when there's at least something basic that works that's licensed in a way that you can just take it?
Sure.
And if it just serves that purpose, that's wonderful.
Cool. So how do you personally use BSD on your machines? What are you running at the moment?
Yeah, and I guess it depends on how you classify the BSDs as an operating system. So one could argue that I've got, over 1,000 BSD machines that I have to interact with. If you count Apple's OS X as a BSD operating system, because at our school systems, we have a tremendous amount of Mac computers. We have about 2,000 workstations that we take care of, and we're about 60-40 split, with 60% of our machines being OS X. So one could argue that that's some BSD, although for most of the end users, they don't realize what's going on. But the BSD userland is used by administration. Apple has something that allows you to sort of push out, it's called Apple Remote Desktop, which is more than just a utility to view people's screens remotely, but allows you to push out packages or commands. And a lot of those commands, there's little checkboxes in the graphical user interface that says run as root, and then you can push out shell commands if you need to change something. And so a lot of the little tweaks we might do to the fleet rely on an understanding of either shell scripting or the sort of Unix-like userland out there. Other than that, as I said, we have some pfSense VPN endpoints that we use. And then in my personal life, I use the I'd say I use them less often than I used to. I used to always have some BSD machines running at my house, running various things if I wanted to play with web servers or other kinds of things. And at my previous job, back when we hosted our own mail server, I was using OpenBSD in between to use their gray listing stuff, and the web server that we ran on OpenBSD. So so that I would say that my primary use of the BSDs has been OpenBSD. It's just because that's the one that I fell into first, and what you're used to feels like home.
That's honestly why I'm on FreeBSD. It's not because I chose it over the other BSDs. It's that it's the one I was exposed to first. I rented a shell account from a Canadian company, and they just happened to be running FreeBSD too, and so that's what I got started with. And then later when it came down to like, well, if you're going to start a shell provider, you should. It's like, well, we can use Linux or BSD. It's like, well, I don't want to get rooted, so I'm going to use BSD. It just kind of went from there. And now, I've spent so much time in it, I know it kind of inside out, and I just don't know that I'd ever feel comfortable on something else.
And for me, OpenBSD works well for my use case, and it probably won't work well for a lot of other people's. But I usually run small one-off things that don't have a long lifespan. Right. And so I have a tendency when I upgrade it is just to wipe it. And I don't worry about sort of the upgrades and everything else. And the other thing is that its default install matches what I'm looking for often in a Unix, which means that the compiler is there. It's got a very minimal X. And when I because I also teach Unix classes at the university, and I rotate between a variety of Unixes, and I just try and get them used to flexibility, because I tell them, when you get a job in the Unix world, you don't know if it's going to be AIX or it's going to be Linux, and what version of Linux, or BSD or something else. But with OpenBSD, I can say, here's a small install that has a very minimal X window install. I think if you jump right to GNOME or KDE, it's a little harder for me to demonstrate, X is just a palette.
Right.
And you can launch them from the command line, and then you can kill a window manager, and getting the sense of all the pieces that go together. And then eventually you say, okay, I used to drag out my SGI machines and say, by the way, here's a very nice graphical user interface from a long time ago. Unix doesn't have to be mean. Right. I know there's some people that have really put some effort into trying to make the BSDs in particular desktop friendly. This guy named Chris Moore.
Doing that for a while.
Yeah. And I'm curious, are you aware sort of how that's been going from a desktop perspective? Because I seem to swim in the server world and not in the desktop world for the BSDs.
Almost always server.
Yeah, no, it's going pretty good. It's BSD on the desktop, I still think, is like the first place a lot of people try BSD. A typical Linux guy, when they come over, that's the first thing they grab is, it's a graphical installer. I can boot up. I can kind of use it with tools instead of having to do a text-based install and then figure out, okay, why don't I have Bash? Why don't I have this? Why don't I have that? And dig into it that way. So no, it's been going well, and the support the last couple of years have actually gotten a lot better now that there's been some focus on porting over video drivers and stuff into FreeBSD.
Yeah, I'm thinking from the the kind of applications I use. What keeps me from being a full-time BSD user. I mean, I like OS 10 because I can't survive without a BSD user land. And it gives me sort of if I don't have grep, and I don't have awk, and I don't have sed, and a few of those other really weird things, I can't do my job. But from a desktop perspective, things like Skype, things like Flash, although I'm finding luckily that Flash is becoming a little less important. Java, I think at least what you've been trying to bundle together is probably taking care of fair number.
Yeah, we've had Skype, Flash, and Java for years now.
That was the biggest thing for me, is that, hey, that's the basic things I need. I run a video streaming company, so we use a lot of Flash, and I use Skype for all of my instant messaging, and then also lately for video and stuff. So those were the biggest things for me, honestly, and the fact that those all work just make my life a lot easier.
Just kind of work out of box. It's still some of the edge cases, like the Silverlights, we don't have, so no Netflix. There's a few things, but as the formats have changed and the browsers have gotten better, WebRTC now, being able to do video chat, I think some of those things are becoming less and less critical to have that one particular closed source app. There's definitely ways around it.
Yeah, as more things kind of move into being based in your web browser, it makes it a lot easier, the fact that Firefox is Firefox, no matter what you're running it on, to just have stuff everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, on my daily life here, all my systems are PCBSD, and we don't mess it. Honestly, it just works for anything I've needed to do. Occasionally you'll find some kids' software or something that's on a CD, and it's like, this needs Windows, and usually Wine will run it. So we can. Otherwise, we just don't bother with going to the store and picking up box stuff anymore.
Yeah, I try and do the same thing with the kids. Actually, there's so much. I guess they lose interest with something so fast that it feels terrible to pay $50 for something when there's usually an open source game that will entertain them for the exact same amount of time before they move on.
So,
how about the audience for like BSD Now? I have no sense of who my audience is. I sort of have a download count. So when I think from an advocacy perspective, who I'm reaching, I have no sense of whether they're end users, whether they're new to BSD or what they are. I don't know whether you have any sense of that.
We get a little bit, like from the emails we get and stuff. Like even at VBSDCon, we met a couple of new users who it was the first time they've been to a conference because they heard about it on the show and they just wanted to learn more or whatever. We get lots of questions from people switching from Linux or maybe interested in switching from Linux. That might be partly just because our podcast runs side by side with the Linux Action Show. Yeah, we get quite the spectrum from just people that have never heard of it before, people that are kind of interested in switching, people that were kind of new to it and are really liking our tutorials for expanding their knowledge. or, you know, kind of power users that, you know, some people like it just to keep up with what's going on. Because, you know, if you're a developer and your head's down working on FreeBSD all the time, you don't know what's going on in OpenBSD, right? And
sometimes it's nice just to see the interviews.
Yeah,
hey, so-and-so, I met him at a conference. I'd like to hear what he's got going on.
I think the interviews are definitely the most popular part, which I guess is, you would know that. You have perfected the art.
We almost need like a new listener survey or something up on the site, like next to the download link.
We should consider something like that just to see if we can find a little bit more about the... we get like, in the last 30 days, it'd be like 60,000 downloads of the whole catalog. But it's like, who are these people and where are they coming from?
Sure.
When I think about advocacy, you know, saying, you know, you end up sticking with what you're comfortable with or what you first got exposed to. Yeah. I guess if I have sort of a regret about BSDTalk is that I haven't had the time to put together tutorials. Because when I was doing tutorials, often I would get comments saying, oh, hey, you know, I'm new to Unix or I'm new to BSD and your tutorials were really helpful. And a lot of my interviews now are more technical in nature. You know, what's a scheduling algorithm or something like that.
Sure.
And so I guess if one were seeking ways to help expand the user base of the BSDs, you know, having material out there for new users such that it's easy for people who are seeking Unix experience to get their feet wet in the BSDs, because I think quite often if you start them there, they may end up stay there.
I was just thinking, you know, I say that about myself and lots of other people, but when we look back at, you know, we asked people how they got started with BSD, I would say at least half the people we've ever interviewed started with Linux and then came over to BSD. So I don't think any hope is lost that if we don't get to people, if we don't hook them first thing, I think we can still convert many of them. We just have to get them before they get entrenched. Otherwise, it takes a much bigger crowbar. So getting back to our questions, how would you say the BSD landscape has changed since you started your podcast almost 10 years ago now?
That's a good question. I mean, I've had a sense that the BSDs... I mean, fragmented's the wrong word because it's not like there's that many more distributions or anything like that.
Diverged.
But yeah, I mean, I guess, or I was hoping that there'd be more convergence, particularly as things like new file systems are coming out. Like back when everyone was using UFS or something like that, it didn't feel like it felt more like a difference in style as opposed to capability.
Sure.
And so certain things that are coming out also as multiple cores becoming more important, other kinds of things. The real differences or the different strengths of the BSDs seem to contrast more now. Yeah. And you really, instead of picking a BSD for your personal taste, you really need to look at what are the specific capabilities of that BSD that you're looking for. And so I don't know whether that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. But I guess it seems like a difference for me that there is a lot of cross-pollination, and you know, you see people that have commit bits on multiple projects and they do their best to bring it together. But the differences in the kernels and the differences in the, you know, what you get out of those kernels definitely means that the BSDs have much more, in my mind, significant strengths in different areas than they used to.
It'd be interesting maybe to see more things along the lines of OpenZFS of separating stuff that, even when it's kind of tightly integrated with the kernel, making it in such a way that it can be ported to the other kernels. You know, there's been a little bit of talk about trying to do that maybe with PF so that it'd be easy to keep the newer versions of PF in FreeBSD and things like that. But
I think also the .com bust has, you know, had some changes. I think, you know, there was a real period of excitement around Linux, and I think it did. I mean, if anything, it really opened the minds of corporations that you didn't necessarily have to pay a lot for commercial software, and that software that was developed by a whole group of people around the world could match or beat the quality in certain areas of commercial software. So that was great. But I think also the honeymoon's over. I mean, Linux is still very popular and it's going strong. And who knows what's going to happen with Open Indiana and that lovely thing that Oracle owns. But it does feel to me as though the shine has worn off a little bit. When I look at what Google is doing, let's say with Android phones, while it's a Linux kernel, everything above the kernel is BSD licensed. And so, I mean, maybe it's not that Linux itself as an operating system is struggling, because I think, from a performance perspective, I mean, there's a whole things technically about Linux that it just does extremely well. But I think the license and the switch to GPL3 definitely concerned a lot of companies, including Apple. And so I think that that's sort of changing the landscape, is that at least from a licensing standpoint, the BSD license is finally re-emerging, because I don't want to say emerging, it's been around forever. But I think it's re-emerging in people's minds.
Yeah, well, I think also there's been a lot of excitement in the last year or so. It finally feels like BSD is kind of getting there. Like ZFS is fully production ready now, and we got the built into the installer now, and we have all these other features, and it's all, and Beehive is huge amount of excitement about that, and it's it's so close to being ready to go, and it just feels like
well, as opposed to playing catch up, like, oh, we need to have this feature that Linux has, it feels like there's a lot of new stuff happening.
So hopefully that spells out
going a step beyond now.
Yeah, and I can put my laptop lid down and open it up, and my computer wakes up, right?
We were just mentioning at BSDCan, there's going to be an entire working group dedicated to making that work on even more laptops. Or actually, no, sorry, it was hibernation. They're getting into hibernation, which is something that we don't really have yet.
Yeah,
I think that there's something to be said for lurking on the technical mailing lists, where you learn that quite often it's not the operating system, but it's writing to the quirks of all the different types of hardware. Like from a theoretical standpoint, hibernation is done, but the fact that a particular brand of laptop with a particular motherboard with a particular chipset, you have to write for all of those possible cases, and that's
on this one. It does it slightly this way,
and it's one of the cases where the distributed nature of BSD is a downside. Where if all BSD development took place at a big office somewhere, you could have just a storeroom full of one of every laptop or something, and a bunch of developers could share them and use them whenever they needed. But that doesn't work so well when one of the developers is in this country and they're not even on the same continent. It's not really feasible to ship the different laptops around to get everybody to make their bit of code work on that laptop.
So, of course, this leads us all to our most important question. So, what do you think about BSD Now? Have you been watching it, or do you have any comments on the show? How it's going?
Love it. I'm so happy you're doing this, because it feels like it takes the pressure off me a little bit for the audio and video side of interviews. So that's awesome. More voices out there advocating is wonderful. Sure. As somebody who ran a small video productions company for a couple of years, video is a nightmare. And so, it's nothing I would ever attempt. So it's great. The fact that you've got people there to help develop tutorials and everything is wonderful, because the kind of content that you're putting together is great. And for me, my only regret, I guess, is that I don't have enough time for BSD Now. It's actually a reasonably long show, and my commute isn't that long, and so you just fall behind. I never can finish them. So occasionally, I'll watch a little bit while I'm chewing some cereal, but that's only 15 minutes. And then next thing you know, by the time I get back to it, there's no point in trying to catch up. So different length media is appropriate for different people.
And I think that's one of the places where we've fallen down a little bit, is that I'm sure that as well as with the other podcasts, that most people are using it on a commute or something like that. And we sometimes, especially the tutorial, is very oriented towards the video version. And so the tutorial is probably really no use if you're listening in the car.
True.
Yeah. But other than that, no, rock on, guys. It's awesome.
Very cool. Well, awesome. We're so glad to have you on the show today, Will. And we'll leave you with this little bit of trivia. Originally, Alan and TJ approached Will to be the co-host of BSD Now.
But obviously, he was too busy.
Very interesting. Yes, a little bit too busy.
I can't devote regular schedules, unfortunately. I don't know how you do it.
Well, Chris was one of the first people we thought of, but there's no way he's going to have time. And Drew's like, just ask him. I'm like, okay. And he said yes. I was like, all right.
Well, it works out. I mean, honestly, if we had, if I had to be sitting on writing all the tutorials and doing all the work that TJ's doing and you're doing, Alan, there's no way. But I work out in my house, so as long as I'm home and not out on the road at a conference or whatever, sure, this is a lot of fun.
And I thought it was only fair that after Will turned the mic on me for his show, that I had to do the same to him.
That's right, payback. Okay, so this week's tutorial, we're going to be doing a cool demonstration, a live demo of tracking and cross-compiling current on NetBSD. So in most of the BSDs, you're going to have different branches or versions of the OS you can use. Oftentimes, in addition to the normal release, there may be a development version with new features, or addition to the formal releases. NetBSD, for example, provides development snapshots and access to the latest code that will be upcoming in a future version. So we're going to go ahead and start pulling one of those. We're going to get started by checking out the latest source via CVS and setting up a few directories. So take it away, Alan. Show us how to do this.
Yep. So I just went to /usr, and I'm going to do this CVS checkout. And this is going to pull down the source code for NetBSD. One of the cool things about NetBSD is actually that it can be cross-compiled. So normally, if you want to compile FreeBSD, you have to do it on a reasonably current version of FreeBSD.
Sure.
With NetBSD, you can actually compile the NetBSD on a FreeBSD machine or some other, almost anywhere where you can run a compiler. So this means, especially if you're, say, building the images for an embedded platform, you could do that on a fast computer.
Bigger system, yeah.
Yes. For example, when TJ was trying to do, when he was testing out this tutorial, he compiled the NetBSD on one of my servers with 24 server processors instead of on his Atom laptop.
Yes. And as soon as we can get cross-compiling for ports, because that's something that bit me with the Raspberry Pi.
Yep.
You know, wanting to be able to build all the ports tree on a reasonable system, not on ARMS.
Yeah. So once we have the checkout, we can switch over to the source directory where we have the checkout. Remember, this step can be done on almost any OS. You run the build script. You tell it the architecture. In my virtual machine is i386. But, you know, the tutorial talks about doing on AMD 64, since that's probably the most popular one. Then you tell it where to output to, and better change that quick. I don't want to overwrite the one I've already done.
Yes.
So you tell it where to
staged.
output to, and you tell it -J how many processors you want to use. Generally, you probably want somewhere like the number you have, or maybe even that +1 to make sure the CPU is always saturated. That way, you're only ever waiting for the disk, or you never have a bunch of stuff waiting while the CPU's got idle, because idle CPU is wasted CPU, right? And then you tell it what you want it to build, like tools, which kernel, the modules, distribution sets, etc., etc.
Those are ticks you never get back.
Yep. There we go. And it starts building. And it bootstraps everything it needs. It even builds like the NetBSD version of Make, if that's not available on the system you're on. And it bootstraps everything it needs and builds your complete NetBSD system.
Very cool. That's almost too easy.
Now, if we go back to this first machine, now if we go to that user OBJ directory, we can see we have all the compiled stuff. So now we just need to install the kernel. So we'll go into sys compile. Where am I? Go into our Arch 36. And there's our generic kernel. So once we're here, we do make install. And that will overwrite the kernel I have on the system, which is like 615, I think. 612, with this development version, which I think is 6.99. something. Now, once we've done that, if we just reboot, when it comes back up, we should be on the new kernel. And then we can install the rest of the userland, and we'll be all set.
I mean, that's all you got to do, that, and then just reboot?
Well, it's pretty similar to FreeBSD, right? You'd go in there and you do make install kernel, reboot, and then make install world. So we'll just wait for it to come back up.
I don't see it in the notes here. Do they have some kind of similar merge script for updating like Etsy directories, or?
I don't see that in here. I don't know about that in particular. They have an updating file like in FreeBSD to explain things. but I'm not sure. I don't have any configs to merge, so it's not a big deal.
Okay.
Oops. 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 Too many windows. There we go.
TJ says there is that in NetBSD. It's printed after you do the install world. It'll have directions on how to merge changes.
It's right on the screen. How about that?
There you go.
So now if we go back to our user obj directory, and we can run our build script. Oh, sorry. We'll go back to the source directory and run our build script. And we'll say use the object directory, but install to /. And that will take care of the...
Mm-hmm.
Failed target install world because of something.
Was it because of that other build you ran?
I don't think so, because I did that in a separate directory with a different output. Looks like the pax command is missing.
Did you read updating, Alan?
I did.
Okay.
Not.
Right?
It only compiled make, not pax. Anyway, if you do that install command, it should work. But this is a live demo, so it won't. It's just how things go. And then you'll have your installed world. But if we do, if we look at our uname now, instead of 612, we're now on 699.33, which is the latest development checkout. And then you can also use this build.sh script to build the ISO images. Right, so if we do build for I3 to 6 to release an ISO image, it will compile those.
Okay.
And then if you go under user obj releaster images, you'll see all the ISO images, and you'll be able to throw those up or use them to install additional machines or whatever you're up to doing.
Very slick.
Yep. And so that gives you all the fun stuff that you need.
Cool. Well, thank you, Alan. That's pretty neat.
One of the other things that the NetBSD can do is you can do the entire build and compile like that as not root. If you just add the -U flag, you can do it as some other user, which can be handy if, say, you have access to a fast server, like TJ had access to mine, but he didn't have root on it. It lets him still compile his stuff, and then he can grab that ISO image and pull it down and run it on his machine that way.
That's pretty slick.
Yep. That's something that they've been working on for FreeBSD for a while, trying to make it so you can do the build without having to have root.
Is that something that they want to have in by 11, I think?
I think so.
I'm trying to remember a previous dev summit if that came up, but yeah, that would
came up at
be
BSDCan last year. I don't know what the progress is so far, though.
Well, we'll find out more, I'm sure,
exactly.
at the next conference.
Hopefully we'll have lots of information for everybody 2 weeks from now when we get back from Asia BSDCon as well.
Okay, and we're back with our weekly news roundup. We're going to quickly go through some of the notables from the past week. So first up, this is an exciting one. I'm looking forward to seeing this in the future, but X11 no longer needs root, it looks like.
On OpenBSD.
On OpenBSD. So please make that work on FreeBSD, somebody.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Yes.
But anybody who's used X for a long time knows that it has, for a long time, required root privileges to run on the main server. So I guess the OpenBSD guys have done some pretty cool work recently that allows you to run everything, including KMS, as a regular user, which that just sounds really neat. So hats off to those guys. That's pretty cool. There's I guess, a sysctl mockdep.allow aperture, which you can set to 0 and still use a GUI as well.
Yeah, so this means that the X server doesn't require special privileges to access the kernel memory or I/O devices directly. And thanks to the privilege separation code, most of the code in X will run as the not root.
That is just cool. That is very cool. So again, I look forward to seeing that maybe show up in some of the other BSDs.
Yeah, they said keeping the special direct access to hardware through an Aperture device was one of the major drawbacks of the privilege separation in X, pointed out in a paper back in 2006 from CanSec West. But they noted a way to do it, and I definitely see it as that's definitely an advantage, even if you have to use a little workaround like that.
Yeah, but that's just all the cool things that brings is just awesome. So again, I'll have to see if I can track one of those guys down at one of the conferences and have them show me that.
Exactly.
See it with my own eyes. Very cool. So next up, we have OpenSSH 6.6 call for testing is out. So I guess they've already done their huge 6.5 release, and now we get a quick routine bug fix update.
Yep.
So grab it, test it out on as many systems as you can. And of course, you can hit up the link afterwards to check the mailing list for a full bug list that's been fixed on that and see what you need to try. Anything specific in there, Alan?
So those changes, they removed the JPEG authentication code, which was experimental and never enabled and was unmaintained, so they took it out. When they process the match blocks in your SSH config, they skip exec clauses because... they skip exec clauses, other clauses based on failed matches or something. I don't know. Confusing anyway. Also, they can do hostname canonicalization, so that way if you access the same host with two different host names, it'll realize they're the same thing, which will cut back on the number of, hey, this key is unknown, right? Because sometimes you access your host by the short name instead of the long name and things like that.
Sure. Well, that sounds pretty cool.
Plus lots of bugs fixes. They fixed a spurious bad file descriptor if you did certain things on Debian and other things. They allow the shutdown syscall and systrace sandbox modes to be reachable if the connection is terminated during the pre-authentication phase. Fixed an unsigned overflow in SSH protocol 1. Clarify behavior of a keyword that appears in multiple matching match blocks. So they improved documentation and a bunch of other stuff. And avoid sandbox violations in the GSS API code. And a bunch of other stuff with SOX proxies, and fixed a memory leak in the ECDSA signature verification. And
sounds like good collection of bug fixes there. That's a pretty good list.
And the big one here, SSHD don't fatal if the FreeBSD capsicum is offered by the system headers and libc, but is not compiled into the kernel.
Oh, I gotcha.
So avoid an assumption there. So yeah, you can turn capsicum off and it won't break SSH.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, nice. So again, hit the link up after the show. You can take a look at those if you want to try out some new OpenSSH hot stuff. So next up, we have some more OpenBSD stuff today about creating an OpenBSD USB stick. So I guess they don't officially distribute any USB images, but somebody has posted some instructions on how to do it.
Yep. You search Google for instructions on how to create a USB flash drive. You get lots of conflicting instructions. And so he thought he'd set the record straight for i386 and AMD64 and write a tutorial. So basically it consists of downloading the install 55 ISO from the FTP site, mount it as a vNode device, set up a new disk image, and basically copy most of the stuff. Set up a disk label and copy most of the contents, and then set up your BIOS boot device on it, and you're good to go.
Cool. Well, I guess it sounds like there's some rumblings that there may be an official one coming down the road too.
Looking at how easy this was to do, I would imagine that they might be able to make official ones as well.
Yeah, somebody will hack it into the build script or the make scripts. Well, cool. Excellent. It'd be nice to see some official ones down the road, but in the meantime, you now have a way to do it.
Also talking about doing what you do and making a hybrid ISO where it could be used as a DVD or a USB.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. That is so much easier to do.
Yeah, well, and it means there's fewer files to upload and download. And
TJ says, take a look at the wait link. They already have an official one for 5.5. So there you go. They've already done that.
They announced that since they posted this.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, they're quick.
Well, that was quick.
Yes.
So there you go. Well, the hybrid one sounds cool. I know I've enjoyed having that, just having one image to actually test
even
and verify.
I've enjoyed that. It's that many fewer files on the mirrors.
That's correct. That's correct. Well, cool. Next up, we have our usual PCBSD weekly digest. So a couple big things this last week. First of all, there's been some updating to how we do PBIs on 10. That's going to be coming out in the quarterly package update a little later this month.
Fancy.
But we're letting people try it now if you want to grab it from Git and compile it. Essentially what it is, for those who want the gory details, we've converted PBIs to run within a fuse layer. So we have a PBI FS, which will mount a virtualized user local directory, which is all your PBI contents, allowing you to still see everything else on the base system underneath. But it just does some magic, with LD config and hints and whatnot, and makes it think it's running in its own environment. So that's kind of neat. It's definitely improved system stability is what we've seen on 10. There's a lot of bugs with null FS doing it the way we were before. So that's been a huge improvement. And I tracked down one kernel bug that causes a kernel panic using Fuse. So there's a PR in for that, and hopefully we'll have a fix for that in FreeBSD soon too, because that'll fix other Fuse file systems as well. In addition, this last week, there were some big changes to the Life Preserver app, which, for those who don't know, that's our backup and restore and bare metal restore utility. Kind of does everything based on ZFS. So it now supports automatic mode for doing backups and snapshots. So you can say, I want to do fully automated. It'll do every 5 minutes new snapshots. And then you can set it to replicate those every 5 minutes to a remote box, or replicate, every hour, every 30 minutes, once a day, as often as you want. At the end of the hour, it will only keep a snapshot from the top of the hour for 24 hours. Then it'll keep one snapshot at the top of the day, and then prune them going out that way. So you'll end up with a yearly, a monthly, weekly, hourly, and then every 5 minutes. So it's pretty cool. And then, of course, some extra checks. If your disk starts getting full, it'll auto prune some of the old ones.
Nice.
But yeah, that's kind of neat. It's been nice on my box. I just turn it on and just forget it.
Yeah, I have all the automated stuff, but I don't have auto pruning to make sure I don't run out of space. That's interesting.
Yeah, we definitely put that in because, on a desktop drive, if you've only got 400 gigs or whatever, eventually you'll run out of space. I think the check right now is once it hits 75%, it'll start auto pruning. That's about
where you want to do it for ZFS anyway.
Yeah, we figured that was the safest place. So it'll start auto pruning the oldest one first, and then see if that frees up enough space. And if not, keep going until we've freed up enough to get you back below that 75% mark.
Nice.
So that's a big one. That's going to be coming in the quarterly package update as well. There's been a lot of work on that code so that the replication works, so it won't prune things until we know they've safely replicated to your FreeNAS box, for example. It's how I do all my desktops here. Everything's replicated to that box, which has 4 disk drives.
Yeah, I really need to set that up on my laptop.
You do. That's what my laptop does, because even though it's got the 2 drives on it, I could still drop it or have it get fried in an airport, or something could happen.
Yep.
And having all my data on that FreeNAS box means I can do the bare metal restore when I get back home.
Exactly.
Just pop a new drive in it, and away I go.
Thanks.
So in addition to that, this was a busy week last week. We had App Cafe updates, so it looks a lot nicer now, a little easier to navigate.
Awesome.
And the login manager got some enhanced support for LDAP and Active Directory logins. So
logging in using single sign-on type things. That's really
so that is. Yeah, so that's in there, and that'll be coming out in the quarterly package update as well. So lots of fun stuff to test. Again, you can hit up the blog link if you want to get some more details on that. So next up, questions from you in the audience. So first up, we have something from Espresso War about consolidating BSD services. So he says he has a home file server with FreeNAS, and his LAN could benefit from running pfSense. He currently has a consumer-grade home router. He's not, however, prepared to add yet another computer to the shelf. I understand that. They're noisy, take up a lot of power, and just one more thing to maintain, right?
Yep.
So he's heard plenty of advice not to run FreeNAS, pfSense, Proxmox, etc. in virtual machines. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, so specifically, FreeNAS, because it requires... it's better, if you're abstracting the disk away from it, then there's that many more problems that can happen. In the case of pfSense, you could probably get away with it, though. Depending, the networking might not be as good, but if it's your home connection, you're probably not going over 100 megabits, and it's not going to matter.
Sure.
you know,
So he's asking,
I've run pfSense in VirtualBox or and also VMware on a Windows machine even one time. It's like it's the machine that's in the right place to connect to the internet connection. So yeah, I bridged the second network card. The second network card wasn't even configured in Windows, but it was set up into the pfSense VirtualBox with a bridged network. So you could do it that way. In the future, it'll be really cool if, you know, FreeNAS can support Beehive and say once it's based on 10.1 or something, and you could actually run your pfSense as a plugin,
a client or
something.
instance.
Yeah, or as a virtual machine on top of your FreeNAS.
I think there are plans to that effect
Exactly.
in a future version of FreeNAS.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, part of his question, he's wondering, assuming the server has enough horsepower, is it still infeasible to run both pfSense and FreeNAS together if he does through some Type 1 hypervisor like Xen, since it's a bare metal hypervisor?
The pfSense you could definitely do in virtualization as long as you don't need super performance out of it or something. The FreeNAS, I'm very worried about virtualizing the disks.
You want to give them the raw disk if you can.
The people that are doing FreeNAS like that are usually doing something like an ESXi, and they're doing hardware pass-through of the disk controller into the FreeNAS. So the ESXi part of the machine doesn't see the disks and then pass them into the virtual machine. The whole controller is inside, is passed through into the FreeNAS, and it has direct access to the disks that way.
Sure.
So then, you know, it's not the greatest, but you can do it that way. But I'm really leery of doing virtualized disks, especially with ZFS on top of that as well. But it's just, when it's meant to be a storage appliance, you want it as close to the disk as you can get it.
Yep. He said he's currently using just the onboard LAN controller. I think he said he thinks it would also need a dedicated dual port NIC for pfSense to control. That makes sense.
You would need two. Well, they don't have. It doesn't have to be a dual port NIC, but you would need two NICs.
A second NIC, yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all the comments, warnings, etc. we can give you on that.
Yeah.
But if you end up doing something fun or something interesting, let us know. I'd be curious to know how you solve the problem.
Yeah. But yes, it'll be nice. Beehive should be mature enough by the time we get to 10.1. Currently you can actually run pfSense and FreeNAS in Beehive, although it's mostly more meant for the developers to test stuff than to actually be used in production. But I've been using Beehive in production on an 11 current box for 2 months now without a problem.
Sure. Well, give it about a year, I'd say, and then you'll start seeing more consumer level stuff running Beehive. I mean, I've looked at it a little bit on PCBSD, and it's getting there, but we don't run current at the moment.
Yeah,
so I'm not gonna do too much with it.
Yeah, I had to upgrade to current to fix one particular bug with Linux that I found or whatever. It's a fast-moving target still, and so that makes it hard to run on a release.
Sure.
Although most of the stuff gets merged back into 10 stable, so all the fixes to run Linux and stuff I think are in 10 stable by now, so that if you did like a snapshot of 10 stable or whatever, since your version,
he more wants an appliance though. So
right.
He doesn't want to mess with all that.
Right. I just, on a side note, if you wanted to do more Beehive stuff in PCBSD, it should be about ready.
Definitely.
Yep.
Okay.
So the next question is from Antonio. He asks about drive setup and configuration. He says, thanks for the hard work for all of us to do the show. And he says his question is about setting up a ZFS machine. And he says, I've mentioned in the past episodes that I don't use entire drives. I use partitions when I do my ZFS setups. So he says his goal is to have a ZFS server that will have mirrored drives on it. He currently has 2 spare drives. In the future, he'd like to add another 2 drives, which will be mirrored as well, giving him 4 drives in ZFS. He says data safety is his first priority. So he says as larger capacity drives become cheaper in relation to his budget, he'd like to replace a pair with larger capacity drives. And so what you do is you take the 2 drives you have, you put them in then as a mirror, and you'll get the space of the smallest of those 2 drives. Then with ZFS, when you get your 2 new drives, you can add those 2 as a second mirror. So you'd have 2 mirrors. And then you'll have the sum of the smaller drive of the first 2 and the smallest drive of the second 2. And if they're the same, then that would make sense. And then one of the nice things is that with ZFS later, what you can do is replace one of the 2 drives of the smaller set with an even bigger drive. And then once it's finished resilvering, you do that to the second drive, and all of a sudden that mirror will snap to the new size of the smallest drive in the set, which will be, you know, say if you replace the two 500 gig drives with two 3 terabyte drives, all of a sudden your pool would have that much more space on it. And then you're
almost magic.
Yeah. And yeah, that really makes it much easier to deal with. And it just happens that that works a lot easier with mirrors than it does with RAID Z, because you only have 2 drives to deal with at a time. Whereas, you know, if you're doing a RAID Z where you have 6 drives, you have to deal with all 6 drives as a unit because they're one RAID group. Whereas with mirrors, if you're doing groups of 2, then. And if you're really worried about data safety, you can have infinite depth mirrors as well, right? Each mirror could actually consist of 3 or 4 drives. You lose that much more space, but you get that much more safety. And you also get that much more read speed, which, depending on your workload, if it's predominantly read, it can make a big difference.
Definitely. Well, cool. And he says he's also looking forward to seeing and purchasing a BSD Now shirt.
Yes, we're still working on that.
Working on it. Yeah. So hopefully we'll have some details for you in an upcoming episode. All right, next up, Christian. He writes in, says, hey guys, you recommend using ZFS on computers without ECC RAM?
Well, we don't recommend it. We say that it's okay to do it without ECC.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not necessarily you have to do this. It's, yeah. So he's like, you tell the risk is not different from using UFS for corrupted buffers, etc. He thinks this is wrong. With doing ZFS, doing scrubs, which UFS you don't, you'll destroy all your Z pools and all data on it while doing a scrub with broken RAM. Not
entirely true. Like when you do a scrub is basically just reading every block and checking its checksum. So in that part, that will never change any data on the disk. And the way, you know, what ECC can fix is not so much defective RAM as just corruption in the RAM. It can detect it and deal with it. So, you know, if you had a problem that ECC RAM would solve, it wouldn't cause every single read for the entire scrub to be wrong. It would probably just cause 1 or 2 to be wrong. And what would happen in ZFS is if a scrub if it reads a block and that block got corrupted in RAM or whatever, and so the checksum didn't match, or the checksum got corrupted so the checksum didn't match, what it would do is go and read the block off the other disk and update the block it decided was broken. If the block wasn't actually broken, but you overwrite it with good data, then
no harm done.
No foul.
I mean, waste some time, but
and if somehow the corruption caused it to think both were bad or something, and it would just say that file's not accessible anymore, or that part of that file isn't accessible anymore, or you know, it would overwrite good data with bad, but the chance of that is fairly slim. He says, you know, with a classic FS, you don't check written data for consistency, and so you won't destroy it if you have bad RAM. But you know, most of the time, in that case, you're going to read it, and it'll be bad in RAM. And so you have the same situation.
When you flush it out, it's bad. Yeah.
So the risk with ZFS isn't all that much bigger. And sometimes ZFS would do a better job because, you know,
at least it's doing some sort of checksumming. And
when it reads it and finds a problem with checksum, it then reads it off a different disk, which is going to go to a different part of RAM. And
plus, you get a notification too, like, hey, something's not right here.
And then maybe you can detect it. So, you know, while ECC RAM is better, right? There's a reason why the FreeNAS guys decided to build the new FreeNAS Mini with the ECC RAM. It's better, but it's not required. You know, it really depends on your use.
Any of my boxes.
If it's just for home use or whatever, you maybe don't need the expensive ECC RAM. Although it's not that much more money anymore, so. You know, it's like the main reason to use ECC RAM is when you're building a server, because there are some servers that will support ECC or not, but they'll take up to 32 gigs of not ECC or 768 gigs of ECC. It's like, I think I'll buy ECC so I can fit more RAM in. You know, so you know, most of the advantage of ECC is more that you can fit more RAM in the same box than it is that you can you get the error correcting. So yes, we recommend you use ECC, but we tell you that you don't have to have it, and it's not like you should. The advantages of ZFS are so good that it's worth the risk of not having ECC RAM, right? Rather than saying you should only use ZFS if you have ECC.
Sure.
Hope that makes sense.
Okay, next up we have Adam with a question about pfSense hardware. What's he asking, Alan?
He says he's been researching building and buying a box to run pfSense to replace his little router. He says he's seen the minimum requirements, but he says it seems like overkill. He found a mini ITX box that runs an Atom TND 2500 and has 4 gigs of RAM, and he wants to run pfSense with a local cache and a virus filter. See, once you get into the cache and the virus filter, I don't know that the Atom might be enough. It probably will be. It depends on how much traffic you're planning to put through it and stuff. But, you know, that's why they have the different system requirements. You can try those little boxes. You know, some of the hardware, it's like, I don't know if that works. And that's why there's the pfSense store. I think it's store.pfsense.org, and they have hardware that they've tested and verified works. Or you can buy something from IX. They make little short depth Atom boxes. That'd be great for that kind of thing as well.
Of course, call them up and tell them exactly how much data you're pushing over the network. Maybe you need something a little more powerful.
Yeah. So like when I was building my router, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get the machine that has 4 gigabit NICs. So obviously an Atom wasn't going to be enough there. So I got a low power, an E3, kind of very, very similar to what's actually in the FreeNAS Mini, except for no hard drives. It actually runs a 8 gig USB stick, and that's the only storage it has because it's just a router. But little short depth box, doesn't make too much noise, but it is a server, and has 4 gigabit NICs and 8 gigs of RAM, and lets me do a lot more with it than what a little Atom would have done for only a few dollars more.
Sure.
And last question.
Okay, from Alex. He's asking about unattended FreeBSD installs. So he says he's having problems finding any information on doing unattended installations of FreeBSD 10. His goal is to have an ISO that boots, creates the standard root on ZFS for driving the machine, DHCP, installs FreeBSD, and then reboots ready for SSH to run. Any suggestions?
Well,
I have a couple, you know. Well, what's yours first, Alan?
Okay. Well, because doesn't your installer do all this?
Yeah, it does. Okay. That's what I was going to recommend.
Yeah. With BSD install, with the root on ZFS code that Devin and I wrote, there are a bunch of environment variables you can set to answer all the dialogues there. So you'd have to basically use the make release process that's built into FreeBSD to build your own ISO, where instead of just launching BSD install with the regular interface, by giving it a bunch of environment variables with all your answers in it, it will make it go unattended. I've never done it, and I don't know how well it works. I've seen people kind of hack it together and build their own installer that does exactly what they want.
Sure.
But, you know, Chris's system is much better.
Yeah. So the PCSys install backend will have on the PCBSD ISOs. You could grab that ISO, open it up. If you boot up your PCBSD box in, say, VirtualBox, and then go through the GUI and set your options. Maybe you're going to do a whole bunch of installs on single disk or systems with 5 disks, and you want to set up RAID Z or something. I mean, it doesn't matter. But once you've done your configuration, there's an option at the end that says save this config to a USB stick. You can copy that config. It's just a single text file. And then you can place that on the ISO and trigger one of the scripts to run it at boot up. So it'll run, it'll apply that config to the disk, reboot, it'll enable SSH because all those options are in the GUI. So you can just set that all up graphically and then just end up with an ISO that you can take around and does a fully automated install. If let's see, I did a talk last year at some of the conferences about doing that with Pixie, but in your case, you're talking the ISO method. But go look at that talk if you can find it. Very similar. The config steps are all exactly the same. You're just going to be copying that config to an ISO that you burn, as opposed to deploying it on a Pixie.
To a USB stick, right?
Yeah, or to a USB stick.
Because that just seems awesome. You like write 3 or 4 USB sticks, walk around to a bunch of machines, stick them in, boot them up, and boom, you have FreeBSD server.
Correct. And I believe there's even docs on our wiki on how to do that.
Awesome.
So, yeah, take a look. There's definitely ways to do that, and our installer is one. But of course, you could try it with the FreeBSD install and write a script for that too.
The FreeBSD installer can do it. Almost all of BSD install is actually just a series of scripts, so you can just call specific ones, and most of them will. There's an environment variable I think called unattended or something. When you set it, it doesn't prompt for stuff. It uses the defaults and whatever environments you've already set. And the ZFS code supports all of that for sure. I'm not sure about 100% about all the other stuff.
Sure.
But, you know, most of it is shell script, and so it's fairly easy to read through by just looking at it's in like user source user.sbin/bsd install, and you can kind of walk through what it's doing and see and pull out the parts you want, or either write your own slightly customized version of it, or just pass the right environment variables and it'll do what you expect. I was helping Michael Dexter build something like this to use the BSD install and root on ZFS code to automatically provision beehives, to basically make a disk image, use BSD install to install everything on the disk image, and then be able to just boot it.
Makes sense.
You might be able to look at what he did as well.
Okay. Well, cool. Hopefully we answer your question. But yeah, there's multiple ways to skin a cat. In this case, find the way that works best for you, and you should be able to make that work. Shouldn't be too much trouble. Well, cool. That's the end of our feedback and questions for this week. So, as usual, we'll mention that after the episode, all the tutorials are going to be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv along with the show notes. So, if there's some link you wanted to check out, go ahead and find that. You can click on it. And as usual, you can send your questions, comments, show ideas, or topics, or if you have a story you'd like to see mentioned on the show, to feedback@bsdnow.tv. We love getting those, and odds are we'll actually put it on the show if it's something relevant to the BSD community. We especially want to hear some tutorial ideas you guys would like to see. So if you have something, burning question, something that's maybe we can't answer in a feedback or question segment, but you want more of a, this is step-by-step how you do it, send it in. We'll be able to consider that for you and see if we can get it on a future episode.
Yes.
And also, we're putting a special call out. If you're a NetBSD or Dragonfly BSD guy listening, we'd like to talk to you. I mean, I know we're talking a lot about open and free BSD, but we're not purposely trying to exclude you. We'd like to get you guys on the show, see if we can get some interviews. And whether you're a developer or not, maybe you're an expert user or sysadmin who has some neat information about those platforms. We'd love to incorporate that into a future show. So we're giving a fair shake to all the BSDs out there. But as usual, you can also watch Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1900 UTC. Although this next week we will be gone out at Tokyo, Asia BSD Con.
But other Chris will probably put the recorded, edited version up on the live stream at the usual time, so you can watch it as if it was live. But we're actually going to go record that right now because, the 2 p.m. Eastern next week will be, 1 or 3 a.m. where we are. So we'll probably be asleep.
No. Well, and depending on jet lag, you may be awake.
Well, no, it'll be Thursday morning there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll probably be adjusted by then.
Yeah.
Either way, we're not doing the show from Tokyo next week. We'll come back with a lot of interviews, I promise. We'll have a lot of cool stuff to show you in the upcoming months.
I have to figure out how I can get a pair of handcuffs through airport security so that we can make some people give us an interview.
That's right. Well, cool. So we'll look forward to seeing some of you guys, hopefully, out at Tokyo. And when we get back, have a lot of good stories, good new interviews to talk about, and just a lot of stuff to try and get into the show before we go into BSD Can in a couple months and do it all over again. So again, thanks for being with us today, and really enjoyed having you guys on this episode. And we will be talking to you soon.